has occupied a central position in almost every nation's foreign policy, whether it be from the West, the East, or the Middle East. Recently, you must have seen in the news that diplomats and higher government officials from various nations are visiting India. Top government officials from the majority of the world's top nations have visited India. Wang Yi, the Foreign Minister of China, visited India on March 25, 2022. India was adamant in its demand despite the fact that his visit was not official and had no real impact. The only thing China needs to do is leave the eastern Ladakh region and India will be satisfied. China, though, was attempting to steer the conversation away from its tendency to seize territory. China felt a little uneasy when India brought the conversation back to the main subject. Foreign Minister of Greece, Nikos Dandias, paid his first visit to India on March 22. Since it was his first visit, he essentially conducted a thorough assessment of the two countries' bilateral relations. Therefore, you can classify the meeting as normal because it involved both countries talking about potential areas of cooperation. Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida, visited India on March 19. He had never before traveled to India for business. In order to further strengthen their unique strategic and international collaboration, both parties emphasized their intention due to the fact that both nations are a member of the Indo-Pacific area. Everything regarding commerce and numerous highway projects in India, building projects are actually being co-financed by Japan, particularly in the northeastern states. One of the most well-known projects is the 20-kilometer long bridge connecting Assam and Meghalaya across the Brahmaputra River. Since 2014, both countries have also met their goal of making 3.5 trillion Japanese yen in public and private investments in India, which includes a number of Japanese industrial townships in states like Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh. Japan is the fifth largest source of foreign direct investment in India. With Japanese assistance, many rail infrastructure projects, including the high-speed rail line between Mumbai and Ahmedabad, numerous freight corridors, and metro projects are being built in India. Additionally, both nations have shown cooperation in areas like 5G, undersea cables for telecommunication, and network security. In essence, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's trip to India was to check on developments addressing all of these matters. Foreign Minister Alexander Schallenberg of Australia visited India on March 19. EU membership includes Austria. The intriguing aspect of his visit to India is that it coincides with the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the economic war waged by the United States and the EU against Russia. Given that Austria is the member of the EU, it is highly unlikely that it will act independently during this time. The bilateral relationship between Austria and India is founded on political, economic, cultural, and academic factors. Nevertheless, during his tour to India, the Austrian foreign minister released a statement. The Russian leader miscalculated his invasion of Ukraine. He claimed for him to say that in India was superfluous, simply because India did not participate in the UNSC vote to condemn Russia. Austria is a member of European Union, so it must adhere to whatever collective policy the US and EU will have against Russia. Ever since India did that, the United States has been exerting constant pressure and issuing indirect threats to India. Therefore, it's possible that the purpose of the Austrian foreign minister's trip to India was to kindly persuade India to support the West. The Canadian Minister of Trade, Mary Ng, visited India on March 10. Her visit's primary goal was to persuade India to waive its prohibition on Canadian pulse shipments being fumigated. A fumigation certificate must be issued for any agriculture material or other products that release fumes in the form of gas and vapor when imported or exported by a nation. You must realize that there was a problem with the importation of Canadian pulses into India for a number of years. Now that it was about sanitary and phytosanitary procedures, Canada was paying more attention to the cleanliness aspect than it previously had. Since Canada is a chilly location and they never had a storage issue, they were sending cargo to India at the time. As a result, they used to send pulses to India without paying any special attention to the cleanliness aspect. Shipments once arrived in India, due to the high rate of degradation of pulses, India used to penalize Canadian pulses by forcing them to be fumigated. Any punishment would now have an impact on the Canadian pulse market. Therefore, the Canadian Minister of Trade visited India to resolve the matter. Saudi General Fahad Al-Mutar visited India on February 14. His visit was intended to increase defense cooperation between India and Saudi Arabia on a bilateral basis. The relations between Saudi Arabia and India are shaped by two factors. The first deals with terrorism, while the second is about economic success. This is the first trip to India by a commander of the Royal Saudi Land Forces. These officers are being trained in the various military schools of the two nations by the Royal Saudi Army and the Indian Army. Mutually, new areas of collaboration are being identified, such as cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, counterterrorism, and intelligence sharing. Both nations' bilateral defense connections are expanding, and both are significant regional powers. And that, in a nutshell, was the purpose of the Saudi General's visit to India. Australian Minister of Trade and Tourism Danti Han visited India on February 9. His primary objective in coming to India was discuss and negotiate a free trade agreement. The Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Pact is also being worked on by both nations. India imports more from Australia than it sells in the fiscal year 2021. Between the two countries, India imported goods worth $8 billion and exported items worth $4 billion to Australia. Therefore, India imports more goods from Australia than it exports, including coal, copper, ores, gold, vegetables, wool, fruits, and lentils. India also imports more goods from other countries as well. So it stands to reason that a free trade deal with India will be advantageous to Australian firms, farmers, and workers, as well as result in the creation of new job possibilities. For Indian students, Australia is a top tourist and educational destination. Free trade agreements are meant to be a game-changing agreements for any nation. In order to boost foreign direct investment, it covers both the reduction and abolition of tariffs and all import and export taxes. The Australian Trade Minister's travel to India was primarily to pursue a free trade agreement because Australia sees India as having the largest and fastest growing economy in the world. Recently, the Indo-Pacific area has caught the attention of many Western nations. France began discussing Indo-Pacific policy with India in 2020. And with the formation of the Quad, Germany and America have already expressed interest in the Indo-Pacific region. Therefore, each nation is developing its own Indo-Pacific strategy, and they all view India as a crucial co-partner in the Indo-Pacific strategic framework. Finally, the UK's Secretary of International Trade paid a visit to India in January 2022. The Australian Trade Minister's tour to India and her own were both on the same theme. A free trade deal with India is desired by even Britain. Therefore, practically every nation in the world seeks something from India, which is advantageous for India because it fosters bilateral contacts and the development of strategic relationships. As a result, India was intended to be visited by representatives from the UK, US, China, Japan, Canada, and even Austria. However, he was unable to, and in the upcoming month, he will travel to India. Accordingly, if you look at the major veto-wielding five, practically every high-ranking minister of official has visited India recently. The representatives of these veto countries are in India during a time of conflict. The climax of this video takes place in the midst of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Why have senior government figures from significant international locations visited India? Why possible causes may there be? India is becoming the focal point of global politics. Which is the answer? In other words, these nations are compelled to include India into the conversation because of its developed foreign policy. Only the United States and China have made an unofficial visit, which means that their trip to India was not pre-arranged. When it comes to foreign diplomatic visits, unofficially they arrived. The focal point of global politics is now India. In fact, during the first week of March, when the conflict between Russia and Ukraine was at its height, representatives from Russia, the United States, Europe, and Ukraine all personally contacted India. India also did not participate in the UNSC vote, which was cast in favor of Russia and the opposing group, which included the United States, Europe, and Ukraine. India was repeatedly pressed to join this side. But all that India would say was one thing: let Russia and Ukraine sort it out on their own. This statement from India was not well received by the Western nations. They frequently proclaimed that India was on the wrong side of history for this reason. In a sense, India was being pressured by EU and the US to choose a position. On the other side, Moscow praised India for having an unbiased assessment, upheld its neutral status during the Russian-Ukrainian war with regard to their affinity with Russia. Neither India nor those nations that were under pressure from the West panicked. United States citizens are uneasy about India because of its particular aspect of Indian diplomacy. So guys, this was for today. Give us your thoughts on this in the comment section. And if you appreciate our content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with your family and friends. We will meet you soon in a next video. Thank you. Jai Hind.